Why is the age of puberty dropping so rapidly? There was a study which found that female puberty started at age 16.6 in 1860 and was 10.5 in 2010. That's around 5 months per decade. This is definitely faster than evolution. I've seen claims that this is because of obesity. But the data show that the rate of age decrease has slowed in recent decades, despite obesity becoming much more prevalent. I read in a magazine once, Scientific American, there's possibly a correlation with weight and nutrition to the start of puberty. Not necessarily an age. Anecdotally, I have a cousin who started puberty developing physically, menstruating, etc., at 8 and was very large for her age, whereas the rest of the family is generally somewhere around 13-14. Believe it or not, the medical science communities haven't always understood how women's anatomy works. We've gotten a little bit better since then. Edward I Longshanks was like 14 and his wife when they had their first kid. That was medieval times. Sir IDK. As a former second-grade teacher, I was sometimes shocked to see visible signs of beginning puberty in girls. Not boys though. My tin-foil hat says because the garbage we eat comes from hormone-injected animals. I don't know about obesity. They are blaming everything on obesity. All 3 of my daughters started theirs around 11. 2 were skinny as rails and 1 was heavy-ish. If the studies you've read don't have an explanation, I don't see why you think the average Redditor would know. I have no idea where you got your data from, but the average range of puberty is between the ages of 8 and 13 in girls and 9 and 14 in boys. I see a lot of people mentioning obesity, but I'm not so sure that's it. My sister and I are both Gen Z and have been very thin our whole lives, and we both started puberty very young. I got my period at 11 and she got hers at 9. The onset of puberty is influenced by nutrition and activity. What things can you think of that might have influenced those factors since 1860? Hormones in food have been a recent thing. Do you have a source for your 1860 figure? That seems incredibly high. Consistent and well-rounded nutrition has a huge effect on growth and development. Almost everyone was always on the edge of starvation 200 years ago. And nobody understood vitamins, macronutrient ratios, etc. A bowl of oat gruel and a turnip a day will not provide the kind of nutrition the body needs to start puberty. So it was often delayed. Today we have the opposite problem. In developed countries. In 1860, did scientists even know what puberty was? How did they test it? Was it self-reported? Could there simply be a cultural issue where an 11-year-old having her period was talked about or reported to scientists or whoever? That doesn't sound right. In Romeo and Juliet, which took place in the 15th century, Juliet's mom says something along the lines of, "I had my first child at your age." Juliet was 13, meaning her mom was 26. There was also a bunch of royals who died giving birth in their early teens. This is definitely faster than evolution. That is a really big claim. Do you have any evidence to support it? I'd have to actually see verifiable data to even acknowledge your point is valid. Who was doing a scientific survey in 1860? What studies and where? If there was a study on this, you should start by finding the study and reading what the researchers had to say about why. Not gonna lie, I do not trust records from the 1860s. Probably because the correlation doesn't exist where you're looking. I read that girls living in a threatening environment, so experiencing constant stress, can bring on puberty earlier. It, apparently, is the body's natural response in order to keep the species going. I got my period at age 14. I was happy it took that long because I was in no rush to start bleeding. It's funny though, I was in middle school and I had friends who'd be like, you could have sex if you wanted without having to worry. That was the last thing on my mind. But I will say some of the middle schoolers I schooled with were pretty developed for 11-13-year-olds. 16. I find it hard to believe that this was common. I've always been told it's because we eat more better. Going hungry does seem like the kind of thing that would cause multiple developmental delays. And in the era before widespread supermarkets and refrigeration, that was a common problem. Now, the issue is less having enough to eat than what we eat. I can pretty much guarantee you the study is plain wrong. What study? I call bullshit. Can someone explain how so many well-known medieval women were married off and had kids well before when they theoretical would have started puberty? I've seen that same study, or at least a similar one. It led to the conclusion that puberty was likely linked to nutrition. Puberty requires a lot of energy and nutrition. Modern people are getting so much better and consistent nutrition and calories that the body is able to start this process ahead of when it was able to in the past. It's not biological evolution. It's technological and social evolution. We are living in an age where scurvy isn't a serious threat to normal people. Your average person has access to an abundance of nutrition. For female puberty, at least enough body fat needs to be reached to begin puberty. So it was harder in 1860 to have a lot of extra body fat. With better childhood nutrition, people have reached enough body fat earlier. This is why people are also taller. And one of the reasons women have less periods back in day, of course, also being pregnant more often. But your periods also stop if you get too thin. However, puberty being before like 10 is a huge concern, and I don't think they have really nailed down why. Yes, there are some really fat kids, but that's not the only factor to make puberty start. I don't believe that 1860 number. What do you think happened after a girl's bat mitzvah or equivalent? I can't believe no one has been able to answer properly. That's insane. Scientists know the real reason, and it has been extensively proven that there are EDCS, endocrine disrupting chemicals in the modern environment which mess with people's hormones. These are found in the food we eat, to the clothes we wear, to the air we breathe. Plastic especially is a major source of these pollutants. Search Susan Nagel Reddit for more info. Additives in food. Chemicals give ebb to cows in their feed and shit. The 1860 studies and even the studies in the 50s used orphans more likely to be malnourished. Hormones that have been added to everything we eat. It's a large combination of factors. We have better nutrition today than in 1860, meaning delayed puberty due to malnutrition is lower. We have environmental factors and artificial hormones causing people to start puberty earlier. But my hunch is one of the biggest reasons is changes to the accuracy of recording of medical results. Back in 1860, women's health wasn't exactly a science.